It is of strategic importance to the not only the US but to the whole oil route, and paradoxically even to China, to India, because everything actually goes out of the Gulf and has to go somewhere.
In a real sense, Diego Garcia is so important to the American empire. It is an extremely important base from which the Gulf War, from which these attacks are done.
It's totally outrageous. I state it again. These are people who are giving lessons to the world about human rights, democracy, blah, 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 etc. But, Mauritian people and Chagossians can't even set foot on the Chagos.
Yeah.
This is totally outrageous.
Welcome to another episode of Independent Thought and Freedom, where we have conversations with some of the most interesting people around the world who are shaking up politics, society, economies, and ideas. We've had some amazing guests on this program, including The Saker, Paul Craig Roberts, Sheikh Imran Hussein, E. Michael Jones, Cynthia McKinney, and more. If you'd like to support us to reach our next goal of actually putting together live events where we bring some of my best guests side by side on one stage, please consider becoming a monthly subscriber on Patreon. You'll find the link below. Also, if you are an author or researcher with important ideas to share with the world and want to have a greater impact, I'm offering a free masterclass, 3 steps on how to leverage your intellectual authority to become a media personality. The link for that class is in the description as well. And now, on to this week's show. Welcome to this week's episode of Independent Thought and Freedom. Are small states doomed in a world of huge powers? With war being threatened between the US and Iran, the tiny island of Diego Garcia is actually playing a crucial role. Yet this island is being illegally occupied by Britain, who in turn is leasing it to the United States. And it is from this base that many of the attacks within the whole Middle Eastern region actually takes place. But the rightful owners of Diego Garcia, it's another small state, the Indian Ocean island of Mauritius. This exposes international politics as games of power rather than respect for law, democracy, or human rights, which the US and the UK are claiming to defend. But at the same time, they are illegally occupying Diego Garcia. So it is deeply ironic. Now, not only intellectually am I interested and tied to this issue, but personally there are some ties as well. I'm also from a small state, and I'm also married to a Mauritian. And so this has given me personal, professional, even some political and media ties to the island as well. Now, as the issue of Diego Garcia is becoming more and more globally important, reaching the United Nations with even suggestions about threats to Britain's role in the United Nations Security Council, I'm pleased to speak with Jean-Marie Richard. He is a Mauritian business and media consultant with expertise in geostrategical defense, trained in France and the US, and he's politically involved in Mauritius as well. And he will explain this issue a bit more to us and its many surprising ramifications. Welcome, Jean Richard.
Hello, how are you?
Good. Hello. It's
Namaste.
A pleasure to have you here to talk about this issue.
Yeah, it's a very interesting issue. Actually, as it's good to be with you guys. Actually, the atoll of Diego Garcia forms part of a broader archipelago called the Chagos archipelago, where there was human settlement which goes down from the French administration days. And those islands, you had three main group of islands: the Diego group of islands, mainly atolls, the Peros Banos group of islands and atolls, and Solomon group of islands. These islands were actually populated mainly by slaves in the old days, liberated Africans when the British took over, and also they were rented or given as concessions for essentially copra production and guano biofertilizers before the time it became quite trendy. And actually, you said that we had a lot of constitutional talks since self-government in the early 60s, which led to the 1965 constitutional talks, multi-party national talks with the then colonial power, Britain. And it was in 1965 that the Great Rift occurred.
And just to be clear, in 1965, Mauritius was still a colony, right? So while you all...
We were still, still a colony, but
we became independent in
self-government.
68, right?
68, we had self-government, okay?
Okay.
But we were still a colony. We still had a colonial secretary, etc., etc., etc.
Right.
And there were talks which would be paving the way to a referendum / general election.
Yes.
And this encompassed many matters. Representation of the different communities, the party system, the electoral system, the constituency gerrymandering, in those times, and we came up under the pressure of mainly minority groups. In those days, we still had ethnic-based census, and there was a sort of rift again within the island between the main component, which was the Indian Asian component. By Indian I mean Hindu and Muslim, okay, which originated some of them from South India, most of them from northern eastern India, and a little bit also from Gujarat and Punjab. But you had the divide, and this chunk of our population constituted the great majority of the people. In those days, we had a population of 700,000 people. 400,000 were of Asian origin, creed, and whatever. So we came up, the guys came up with a system which is called the best loser system, which enabled a representativity, ensured representativity of minorities in parliament. It's a first past the post system, 3-member constituency, and following the poll, those people or those ethnic groups then identified as such, who were not enough represented in parliament, could ensure a seat depending on their results as good losers or best losers.
Yes, it's really fascinating because I mean, in Trinidad and Tobago here, we have a very, very, very similar history to Mauritius of French planters, and then British control, and slavery, and then Indian indenture, and these issues, and there were and Guyana has the same issues, and I've spoken to Guyanese politicians on this show, because there were ethnic problems that were coming up as independence was approaching in all our small island societies. Although Guyana is not a small island, it behaves
It's a
like a
vast
small
territory.
island
Yeah.
because everybody is on the coast, and it's a smaller population than even Trinidad or
Mhm.
Mauritius now. But yeah, and each one of our countries, in fact, had very, very, very different solutions to the ethnic political problems. It's very interesting because the British would not allow proportional representation in Trinidad. They said it was divisive. In Guyana, they said you have to have you have to have proportional representation, or we won't allow you to be independent. And in Mauritius, it went even further. You have this very unique system of 3 past the post, not 1 past the
Exactly.
post, and this best loser system, which doesn't exist anywhere else in the world, which is to
And
ensure equal ethnic representation without upsetting the balance of parties. And yeah, so you had all these complexities going towards independence. And now,
exactly.
how did Diego Garcia fit into this? Diego Garcia was not a military base in 1965, was it?
No, it was not a military base, but it had received the visit of Americans as early as the early 60s or the late 50s, coming out of World War II.
So
And
military, okay, so sometimes the military would have passed
yeah,
through, okay.
they were passing and they surveyed the island, and the British in 1965 actually dissociated the Chagos Archipelago
Yes,
uh, from the administrative jurisdiction of Mauritius, which
right,
was held from Mauritius mainland, as they did with the Seychelles in 1901 or 1902. The
right.
Seychelles, likewise, the Chagos and Agalega and Saint-Brandon and all these, you know, sort of particles of coral or basalt in the island were administered from Mauritius. Okay,
Right,
in
okay.
1901 or 1904, Seychelles was detached, and then in 1965, the British started evacuating by hook and crook rather than crook and hook, both of
Yes.
them, the local people who had been staying there for 5, 6, 7 generations, and their claim was that to be able to, the Americans showed interest because we were entering the age of King Oil, and
Yes.
the Middle East started becoming the place where oil was being found and the roots were being traced. And so the claim was the Americans said, okay, we are okay to rent these islands from you, but we have to make sure that there's no native population on the islands.
That's very
So
interesting
then,
because a similar thing happened in Trinidad during World War II. The northwestern peninsula of the island was identified by the Americans as a good place for a base. And there were bases
mhm,
actually throughout the island, but in particular in Chagaramas in Trinidad. And they also evacuated the place, took over people's lands. And to this day, people have claims their property. They've lost, families were displaced for the American base. And in our process of getting independence, the issue of Chagaramas and the American occupation there was a big thing. I suppose it's like, in a sense, like Guantanamo in Cuba to
exactly,
some extent.
exactly, yeah.
And so this is another case which the world doesn't really yet know so much about. I mean, in diplomatic circles, people might know, but as a wider issue, people don't realize um, what is being happening here. Why? So while Britain and the U.S. are fighting for democracy and human rights, etc., they're illegally occupying uh, these bases upon which to launch their attacks.
Actually, you're referring to the International Court of Justice opinion last February 2019, which actually focused on the new resolution on the need for Britain to vacate rapidly. Now, what do diplomats understand by rapidly when you refer to what has happened in the in Palestine and the number of resolutions, condemnations, ICG opinions, blah blah blah,
Yes.
and the wall has been the wall is still there, and we know what's happening in the Holy Land. So the effectiveness of so-called moral stand and moral obligation for the UK to vacate, I personally do have some doubts, and the term of rapidly hand over Mauritius the Chagos Islands, this can be very elastic in terms of time. And those days, those last days with the heating up in Iran and in the Gulf, certainly does cater for provide a good alibis for the cowboys to stay. We want to stay there.
Yeah.
No, come back to 65. So in 65, the Americans say, okay, we don't want any soul on these islands. And the British said, and it is now demonstrated, it is now established because the files were open to the public in the last 10 years, but it was a blatant lie. And we said, no, there are no natives there. These are just plantation workers. We'll just take them away and send them to where they belong, that is the majority of them being dumped into the suburbs of Port Louis in Mauritius, and a small minority being dumped in the suburbs of Victoria in the Seychelles. So you've got a binational Chagosian diaspora from those who were initially there.
A forced population movement that happened in 65. That's what it was, wasn't it?
A very insidious way. That is, people, they used to travel to Mauritius for medical leave, for their vacation, for taking care of the kids who went to school, etc., etc., etc. They left the island to go for, let's say, for 5 weeks, 6 weeks, or 3 months. And then when they wanted to come back, between 65 and 73 was the time span during which the Chagos were depopulated.
So people would leave their home, go to Mauritius for whatever reason, and then they wouldn't be allowed to return home?
Exactly. That's exactly what happened.
So all the property, all the possessions.
The possessions were, the island was considered as state land, and they were considered, they were living there for 5, 6, 7 generations. The cemetery was small, the primary schools, the infirmary, etc., were all left behind. And we have a famous, which has become now an iconic song. It's called in the local Creole, it's called Motonton Sobourik, the donkey of my uncle. So my uncle, it's sung by a Chagosian singer, and he relates this the evacuation, the forced evacuation on the last ship to leave the Chagos in 1973, which is called the Nordweer, and they were all piled up there and said, okay, you leave your animals there, you take whatever you have to take, and we are sending you either to Seychelles or Mauritius. And so this guy is talking about this exodus, this forced removal of population.
And how many people would you say that? Would it be thousands of people or hundreds?
Yeah, I think nowadays the community with it's really 3 generations. They were something like 2,500 people.
So is it that they were considered squatters on state land, and so that's why they were pushed out?
They were considered as casual workers, field workers, and non-indigenous population
for 6 generations.
And they left. Most of them have today passed away because they left in 73. So 27 years plus 19, it's 2 generations. So if they left, they were 20. Some of them managed to go back on the islands after a long series of dispute, because apart from the sovereignty issue, which is a state geopolitical issue. You have the citizenship issue, which is a more personal, and by lots of going through lots of hassle, they managed to get a semi quasi UK citizenship in the late 90s over early days
Okay.
of this country.
All
So
of
they
them
were
or some of them?
those who were native from there,
Yeah.
because there was a judgment in the 2 or 3 first court cases where
Right.
they were recognized as British subjects of the British Indian Ocean Territory.
Right. So they've
So
been
we had
fighting this for
limited
decades and decades in all sorts of ways.
decades.
Personal ways,
They finally,
geopolitical
yeah,
ways,
and
international
then
court. Right.
when they obtained a judgment that was about 15 years ago, the government, then government, ordered and issued an order in council which bypassed totally the law, and then they went to European Court of Justice, and then lately to International Court of Justice, and we are still, the battle is still on. So, but over the years, the Mauritian government, in 65, initially there was a compensation which was paid. There was a trade-off
A
for
compensation to the government, to the individuals, is it?
to the government, normally to be sent, to be given to the individual families which were displaced.
Because
Okay?
just to keep on this point, I just want to clarify from you, because I'm just interested in the communities and the dwellings and all that. So was it that the dwellings were raised and just bulldozed down or something? Were these like little shacks,
yeah.
or were they substantial dwellings?
There are some buildings which are still there, but they are now ruins.
Yeah.
Yeah, there used to be, the administrator's dwelling, and then all the other people who were living on the free islands. The sad thing of the story is that in 65, you want to construct a base in Diego Garcia? Okay, fine. We were right in the middle of a Cold War.
Yes.
We had just walked away from the Cuba missiles problem, and it was just 1 year or some months after the assassination of Kennedy. There was a new president in the US, etc. And so some people in the delegation said, okay, you want to do your base in Diego Garcia? Fine, no problem. But we keep the sovereignty as an independent nation. You can lease, you can pay the lease to us instead paying to UK. So it was against the terms. And you can use Mauritian labor to build your base. You leave the people on Perros Panos, which is more than 60 kilometers away, and Salomon. And the American were just ruthless and said, nobody on the islands.
Right.
Okay, we have to create our base, and it is today one of the most sophisticated military facilities we have in the world, in this part of the world, definitely. And as you rightly said in your introduction, Kirk, from there, Desert Storm was commanded. B-52s went there to bomb Kuwait, Iraq, and certainly if the escalation continues in Iran, it is a large aircraft carrier which is less than 3,100 miles from the target.
In a real sense, Diego Garcia is so important to the American empire. It is an extremely important base from which the Gulf War, from which these attacks are done, because I believe it's out of range of like, say, Iranian missiles and stuff like that. It's close.
Yes,
yes. So
definitely, because you've got 3,000, so you really have to have medium to long range ballistic missiles to be able to touch Diego Garcia. But with air airlifted fuel stocks, the B-52s can launch their attacks from there, over drones from the B-52s, and be on target, definitely. It is of strategic importance to the not only the US but to the whole oil route, and paradoxically even to China, to India, because everything actually goes out of the Gulf and has to go somewhere. So it is a very strategic platform, and you know that since then they have also have now a backline with the military facilities granted to India on the island of Agariga. Okay, but this is another, most certainly another issue. Yeah, definitely the facility in Diego Garcia, you have nuclear submarines there because it's one of the most deep lagoons, atoll lagoons in the world. So that's very important to have your submarines with multi-headed conventional or nuclear tactical warheads on board. So it is a major platform, and at the same time, I believe it is also a major deterrent, because if they could strike into Kuwait and into Iraq from Diego Garcia, Iran is about 1,000 kilometers closer to Diego Garcia. So when you look at the map, it's quite easy to understand that the defense purpose of Diego Garcia makes, in this perspective, quite great sense, because it is the watchdog to this whole highway of oil tankers and natural gas. Natural gas goes from the Gulf to Japan, China, etc. It has to go upwards, and it has to go down through the Cape, over Suez Canal, through this route. So it is really it's a major platform in terms of geostrategic and defense. And in the second level, you have the increasing influence of powers like China and India, which comes into place. And this is yet another game which is being played today. And certainly the Iran crisis will be a great case study in terms of geopolitics for the positioning of both Russia, to a certain extent, China, India, and don't forget we have also Pakistan, which is just opening on the Arabian Gulf, and other countries and other interests. Definitely.
So this is very interesting here, because I mean, from what you're outlining, it seems that, listen, this is of objective geopolitical, geomilitary importance, and it's like, well, Mauritius just has to get out of the way. The big superpower has declared that this is absolutely necessary, and
that was the initial claim, Kirk. That was the initial claim, and when the renewal of the lease came some 10 years back, so there was the issue in Iraq and Kuwait. So to steer up the defense hype.
Yes, exactly. So it continues, and its importance continues. So and so I guess a lot of people would say, well, Mauritius is just a small state. It has no relevance, no power, no significance in the world, and America is the defender of global democracy, and so this is just one of the casualties
of the
fight for freedom. How do you as a Mauritian
this is
react to that argument?
That's a very, very interesting yet tricky question. Coming from an island, you will certainly understand this. coming from a small island state, but you've got oil. We don't even have oil. And Mauritius has always been on the fence in terms of geopolitics and diplomacy. They wanted to be everybody, always wanted to be everybody's best friend. I can recall only during the first war on Iraq, after the Kuwait invasion, one foreign minister had the guts, and his name is Jean-Claude de Lestrac. He was still in politics those days. He had the guts to at least admit that the Gulf War, the war to liberate, quote unquote, Kuwait, proved the necessity of having a military base on Diego Garcia. And I think this question is now generally accepted by most of the political mainstream here in Mauritius, and even the present government. Their stand is to say, okay, we have absolutely no problem with the base, but the sovereignty is ours, so you should pay us the money. So there's no question, I think, today, and for the next 20 to 25 years, awaiting the gearing up in terms of power game between the two superpowers of tomorrow, starting today, which are India and China.
Yeah.
And we're right in the middle of it nowadays. I think the rationale behind Diego Garcia objectively will, as a military-based, leaving apart the question of sovereignty, leaving apart the question of human rights, leaving apart the question of free generation sacrifice or whatever, is certainly will prevail in international instances. And my reading is that the facility provided to the Indian government for runways and all these military facilities in Agalega, which is basically halfway between us and the Seychelles, is maybe a solution of, retreat if ever someday something happens over Diego Garcia, which should not be written off. Technology being what it is, I think the people who are thinking the defense strategy and the defense rationale for the next 50 years have already seen this. But also there is a fact that the power game will be between India and China.
Okay, and, I just like some clarification here.
Yeah.
So I mean, so on the one hand, you're saying that it appears that the political aspect, and we could discuss this a little more, that is more now an economic issue than, say, a political issue in some senses. But then the other thing is Agelaga. Is that what it is? That it? Am I getting the name right? Agelaga.
Agalega.
Right. So,
Agalega.
So with Agalega, is that Mauritian controlled or is that controlled by the U.S.?
It is Mauritian territory.
Okay.
You have something like 300 people living there, and definitely we will be having 1,500 Javans on this facility. Okay.
So this is another island that's now under Mauritian control, because Diego Garcia is seen as Mauritian territory, but illegally under the control of.
Yes, but it is not acknowledged. It is not acknowledged now.
But you're saying that Mauritius has given India a military base on Agalega. Is that right?
Mauritius has granted facilities for the setting up of definitely a military facility with an airstrip of 3.2 kilometers. It's not the Dornier or
Yeah.
turboprops who are going to use the place. And you have lots of people, building the jetty, etc., etc., etc. So it's really being hyped up into at least what has been done in the Andaman and Nicobar Islands in the Sea of Burma. It's at
How
least
far is Agalega from Diego Garcia?
1,000 kilometers.
Okay, so it's a
yeah,
good
it's
distance.
a bit. It's a good distance. Yeah, yeah.
But so it's almost as if I guess Mauritius can use these small islands as part of its economic assets.
There has been a trade-off. There definitely has been a trade-off. Actually, it has been reported in many online and print or audiovisual media. It appears that today there has been a major trade-off for the end of the double taxation treaty in its original form with India to counter round tripping. Okay, and this is still detrimental to our offshore financial services center.
Right.
And so the BJP government of Narendra Modi said, okay, guys, this has to stop at some stage. And there were many tractations and negotiations which went on. And so the access to the islands was granted. In compensation, there was quite a big chunk of $1 billion
right.
aid, which was given. And it's a way to capitalize on the geographical and geostrategic importance of our islands, definitely.
So this is interesting here now, because for people that aren't familiar with the geography, Mauritius is and these islands we're talking about it's kind of in the middle of the Indian Ocean in a sense. So it's between Africa and Asia, the Middle East, and even to a certain extent Australia.
Mauritius itself, yes, it's closer to South Africa than it is to the equator. Yeah. Okay, but Agalega is right down in the middle between Seychelles and Mauritius, and Chagos is further right. When you see the massive Indian Ocean. Okay,
east.
So when you in furtherance of the Chagos, you can get the beginning of the Maldives.
Right.
So you see the impact of the footprint of these islands in terms of geostrategy is quite important. And when
I want to ask, is Agalega, is that would that be India's furthest reaching base? I would imagine so. I don't think India has bases around the world. That seems to be
definitely actually India.
Yeah, continue.
India woke up when China started the new Silk Route, which is nearly ready. Round tripping Himalayas and going down into Pakistan, and also India. China was also very much present in Sri Lanka, and with naval facilities. In Djibouti and just the tip of the Horn of Africa, which is quite a strategic position. Yeah. Now in Mombasa, because they took over the port with their loans. So India woke up and said, okay, now we have a problem. And they initially had secured a deal on the island of Ascension in the Seychelles.
Right.
But the situation being what it is in the Seychelles, it's a presidential system. The president was from one majority, and the parliament turned to be the opposition of the majority. So the deal was never sealed and never formalized by a vote in parliament. So
what year was that, by the way?
That was about 2 or 3 years ago. Okay.
Right. So it's very recent. These things are very recent.
Very recent. Very recent. Yeah. They still have some birthing facilities in Victoria, but the plan was to develop a full-fledged military base on the island of Ascension l'Ascension in Seychelles, and it didn't go through. The ratification didn't go through Parliament. Now, what will happen next year, post the general elections and presidential elections? That is another issue. But definitely, India is starting to finance its projects in Africa, because it's not a secret for anybody. We are known as Chota Bharat, okay? So Little India. And because of many historical things, and we have seen more and more footprint of Indian businesses, institutions, now military, cultural, etc., being using the Mauritius as the back office of Indian influence in the region. The next step, I believe, will be a sort of South Indian Ocean conference, Indo-Mauritian states, Indo-Mauritius, Seychelles, Madagascar, where you have a very thriving Indian community too, but mainly from Gujarat, and to counter the influence of the
Silk Road,
Middle Eastern countries in the region. Yeah, knowing that France also has interest.
Yes.
In the region.
Just to provide some context for the listeners, I mean, Mauritius is a multi-ethnic. Although it's a small island of just 1.3 million people, I think it is, same population like us in Trinidad, and like us, you have Muslims, you have Hindus. It was a former French colony, and then you have a strong Chinese presence as well. You have an Arab link and presence through the Muslims. It's a very, very complex set of balances that's not only political, like alliances through politicians. It's because you have populations there that are tied to there. So it is very much a connection of the domestic and international situation. Yeah, so you have the French connection, which is important, as well as the Indian connection and the British connection. Yeah.
Yeah, Indian connection is really gathering momentum for the last 15, 20 years. The British connection is a bit shattered those days with Chagos issue, and the American connection is via the British connection. But true it is that the influence of India is becoming more and more prominent in every aspect of our lives here. One, because we have a majority of the population which directly or indirectly through mixed marriages or whatever are of Indian origin, both north and south and east and west, okay, from Calcutta to Punjab, Sindh, from the northeast, Bihar, UP, and to South India. This is a fact. Huh? And
Yes.
then the majority of the Muslim community also originate from India, even if, as one of India's former ministries, external affairs minister, said some of them tend to forget that they were Indians by birth, and but that's another issue. But there is definitely a power game also between countries like the Emirates, United Arab Emirates, Saudi, Egypt. We have a diplomatic representation in Egypt, strangely enough. We have a diplomatic, since this year, representation in Riyadh, strangely enough, okay? And there has been quite a lot of exchanges between the Arab world and Mauritius. Our Muslim community is mainly Sunni and Indian-based, okay? And we don't really feel this Sunni-Shia divide here in Mauritius. Maybe this is one of the reasons why, with the Iranian crisis, the Mauritian diplomacy has remained very eloquently silent and hasn't taken sides, sitting again on the fence.
I want to add one thing for our international listeners who may not be aware of the Mauritian situation. In the context of all this, what I'm talking about all these different groups and the domestic pressures and the international pulling here and there, Mauritius is a very successful country. I would say it is one of the successful post-colonial countries. There are many countries, and even in the Caribbean, they sometimes debate: should we have stayed with Britain? Have we done better in independence, or should we have been like the Cayman Islands or Turks and Caicos and stayed? But there are places like Singapore which definitely did better after colonialism. And when Mauritius first became independent, even our own great author V.S. Naipaul wrote off. Wrote off Mauritius, said it was going to be a basket case.
Overcrowded Barracoon.
That's right. And then in the 1980s, and in a sense, he was right in the 60s and 70s with the levels of poverty and stagnation in a way. But by the 80s, you turned everything around. And it's amazing the progress you have made. And you've been able to take advantage of you used your mixed population as an asset. And I mean, China was important in that as well in the 80s, wasn't it? With the textile industries and investment. Am I correct?
Yeah, Hong Kong.
Okay. Actually, Hong Kong more than China.
The restitution of Hong Kong to the People's Republic of China actually caused a migration of capital and people, which kicked off the manufacturing industry. Okay. We shifted from a sugar boom in the 1970s,
yes,
which maybe is one of the causes why the Chagos drama was totally ignored in the 70s, apart from a couple of politicians, namely the Michel brothers and others, more leftist movements, the MMM of Béranger of the 70s and the 90s. Right. They did draw attention of the world on the plight of the Chagossians. But we came out of the sugar boom, and then two devaluations. So necessity became the law of invention. Okay. So, and we had this opportunity from the retrocession of China. Capital started to flow, people started to get full employment, and the hype was on till the 90s, right? Mm-hmm. And we have been effectively quite successful, but there was also a political push for people to migrate, acquire skills, and their children or their grandchildren are now coming back to the island. So we've netted a sort of diaspora, which always keeps links with Mauritius. And we have this very specific diplomatic and economic diplomacy base called the countries of population, les pays de peuplement, we say in French. We still have very special ties with our former sources of population. Definitely India today is in the forefront. China, we were one of the first countries to recognize the People's Republic of China in 1972. Mm-hmm. You know, that was even before many European countries. We recognize, obviously, Pakistan and India, and the European countries and Australia. So we have now diasporas from people from countries of population. We have now countries of our diaspora. Okay, the only, I think, this is my opinion, the black spot here in this thing is our African policy, is our African outreach. I believe it is quite appalling to date. And my example, my illustration of that being the go slow in allowing Ethiopian Airlines to serve Mauritius on the same with the same facilities as Emirates or Saudi. The other one being the lack of interest in African diplomatic drives.
Right.
The last summit in Nairobi, we were underrepresented, definitely, at the highest level. And so this is, I think, is something we will have to remedy, because the market of tomorrow is definitely Africa, right? We have a population which is of African origin. We have links between communities, ancient sugar countries like Zimbabwe, Zambia, Nairobi, where we do have many links. Mozambique, for example, you have generations of Mauritians who have migrated with the mills in Mozambique. So this part of our economic diplomacy is lagging behind. But I think also that with the push, given the leapfrog which India will give us in terms of economic diplomacy, with communities, thriving Indian communities in places like Ghana, for example, unheard of in Mauritius for the last 10 years. They are starting to emerge. Countries like Benin, Angola and Mozambique, these are neighbors, right? But we still have some connectivity problems with mainland Africa, and this certainly will have. What is happening now in Iran and in the US will not facilitate the process, definitely.
Yes.
Because people who are traveling even via Dubai today are saying, what can happen tomorrow? One missile can go nuts, and nobody knows what can happen. And so this is.
Now, one thing that I find quite incredible with the recent developments with Diego Garcia is that while it appears that it almost appears inevitable that the U.S. and the big powers are going to just have their way, that Mauritius is insignificant and whatnot. Yet, in this vote that happened in the UN Security Council, well, the ruling, I can see a ruling by a court because it's done objectively, by law, by rules and whatnot. So size doesn't matter in terms of arguing principle. However, when it was taken to the UN and countries having to vote on a resolution, and the US was lobbying hard, the UK was lobbying hard for people to basically put aside Mauritius's claim, the support for the United Kingdom went down to single figures. What I have here from newspaper reports is that, the US, Hungary, Israel, Australia, and the Maldives, interestingly, which is also in the Indian Ocean, they backed the UK vote. But 56 countries abstained. So France abstained, Germany abstained, the Netherlands, Portugal, Poland, Romania, and other European allies like Austria, Greece, Ireland, Spain, Sweden, Switzerland, they voted for the UK to relinquish the sovereignty. So Mauritius got so much support. So there's censure by the UN. People have been talking about, and I don't think it's going to happen, but they've raised the issue that Britain may not even be able to retain its Security Council seat because it's in violation of the United Nations support, and it's just ignoring the ruling. So
actually, the ruling, the ruling, which is not a ruling, it's an advisory opinion. Okay. This is on what, but definitely, as I think the Iranian PM or Minister of External Affairs stated the day before, they sent some missiles on the US bases in Iraq. It was a, astounding and very vocal, very slap in the face, morally speaking, for the UK and the US and their allies. The question of Maldives is definitely there's a question mark to be put there. My information is that they were not contacted for our diplomacy. Again, didn't do its job properly. This is my opinion. Likewise for other countries which are absent. It could have been a major walkover, as one could put it, but it remains an advisory opinion. Okay, there's no ruling. I've read the advisory opinion. It is a moral ruling, definitely. It is morally a slap in the face, right? For those countries who pretend to be great human rights defenders, the saviors of democracy, blah, 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 etc. It is. But when, unfortunately, in the 70s, the Chagossians were qualified as the Palestinians of the Indian Ocean. This was the term used.
Right.
And definitely the context is different. But this state, and we know what has happened of the resolutions of the UN regarding the state of Palestine, right? So there are some interests which prevail, which are beyond the control of our small states. So, I mean, we have to be very realistic. I personally do concur with the opinion that there is no political will in the West, France included, the European countries included, to give way to the opinion of the International Court of Justice. Because you know as well as we do, to ensure the effectiveness of a ruling or advisory opinion which has a very moral, very strong moral grounds, the states and the governments must recognize the jurisdiction. And the point of the UK was to deny the jurisdiction of the International Court of Justice from the outset, stating that it was a bilateral issue, not a multilateral issue. But this is the way it is. This world runs like this. And with what is going on nowadays in the Middle East, if the escalation continues on this trend till around June, don't forget we have an election, we're in election year in the US. I don't think that Donald Duck Trump it's quite injurious for Donald Duck, actually. will want to spoil his chances of being re-elected. The escalation will lag behind, I believe, till June, and then, he stated it in 2011 when Obama was sort of giving marching orders to go onto Iran on the nuclear processing issues. So yeah, it's really unfortunate, when you see the living conditions and how these Chagossian people are enduring for the last 20 years, 40 years. Most of them really had a very harsh time. It was an ordeal of a lifetime. And some of them are quite well off now in the UK. And surprisingly enough, they are saying, we want to remain British. Yeah. We do not want Mauritius to take over. We are happy like this. We are fine. Okay. So these are voices also which have definitely have their leverage in certain media, and they are more or less integrated. They make their livelihood in the UK, and you have different stands of opinion. But my stand is that, yeah, the countries have voted for because it was very chic. It gives good conscience. Yeah. But have you ever seen good conscience win a war?
That's right.
Be it on the battlefield or in diplomacy. So I may sound very cynical. I may sound very has been or yeah, no. but this is the reality. It is really outrageous that the Chagosians cannot go back and live on the islands, Salomon or Perosmanos. We, as islanders, we are so much attached to our elderly, to the graves, for funerals and everything. You know, all these rituals which come to us from Africa, Madagascar, India, and China, and even Europe. So it is really something which is difficult for us to bear with and to live with. But at the same time, you know, the economics, the strategy, and the geopolitics of the region are such that, you know, the British Navy will get involved for the Falklands, as it did in the 80s. But I don't think the Mauritius Navy as a naval vessel who can't even go more than 3 days at sea. So now name it if you want to go to enforce the matter. And at the same time, there is a global aspect, and each and every government who will come will have to visualize the global aspect. Our Prime Minister is flying to London on Friday. He's meeting Boris Johnson. He's going to evoke, it's on the Africa UK summit, okay? So there will be talks going on. But even if it had been Jeremy Corbyn, do you really think that Jeremy Corbyn today, in this present context, a Labour government would say, okay, we are giving back the Chagos to Mauritius? That's a joke.
Now,
I'm sorry to laugh about it, but you know, as you know, he said, this famous author said, if I laugh at any mortal thing, it is that I may weep.
That's
okay?
Right, exactly. So, if you don't laugh, you'll cry. So what to try to bring the discussion to a close, I mean, you've offered some really great insight into the matter. What do you see as the way forward? Is this, well, you just have to give it up, it's going to be like this? Is it to get compensation, maybe at least monetary compensation for those families that were forcibly removed, maybe some sort of apology for restitution, you know, give up the claim, or does the claim just kind of keep there? It's a nice topic for leftists and anti-imperialists and nationalists to bring up every once in a while. What do you see as the...
Make no mistake, Kirk and the viewers. This issue is a highway for local politics.
Yes.
They will keep it on going and going and going because the dividends are so much important. In terms of local politics, in terms of, you know, African international politics, regional politics, in terms with our bilateral relations with France, with Australia, with the UK, even the US, okay? We agree to disagree, but we can disagree to agree also.
Yes.
Okay? So we are right. I think we still can capitalize on the issue, on the ethos and the morality of the issue. Definitely, call it compensation, call it economic facilities, call it, you know, loans or whatever. I think we have definitely a card which can you know, use the emotion of people, and some states, because they have also public opinions, are very ticklish regarding their image. Okay, I think India is a good example. It's a huge democracy. Regarding what has been happening in the last 2 months or 3 months, okay, it does impact on the image of India, and with the immigration laws and the citizenship laws, etc. It does impact. But there is a public opinion. It's different when you go to some countries in the Middle East. It's different when you go to some countries in India. It's different when you go to countries like China or Vietnam, where public opinion don't give a damn about it, So there's some the freedom of speech and expression. We still have it.
Yes.
There's no censorship on what we are saying, and we are still there. So I think, the country and generations to come will continue to have a sort of claim, a legal claim, definitely, an international law case, definitely, and also a sort of romantic ideal, as you put it, third world, non-aligned, sort of rhetoric, which gives a good conscience to everybody. And then enables everybody to, strike a deal.
Yeah.
Because this is the idea, is to be able to strike deals.
Yeah.
Right? It's not, I give you this and I take this, and I take this and I give you this. So the merger, the haggling potential of this hot potato on the international scene can be very interesting and effective for infrastructure projects, partnerships, business partnerships, etc., etc., etc. So we have to be very realistic about it. It's totally outrageous. I state it again. These are people who are giving lessons to the world about human rights, democracy, blah, 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 etc. But, Mauritian people and Chagossians can't even set foot on the Chagos.
Yeah.
This is totally outrageous.
Yeah.
They have to be, ushered by military, get special boats, have special permission, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so these are cards, I think, which can be used, should be used, and will be used to continue putting the pressure, give everybody a good conscience, okay, and be able to strike a deal in other spheres and at other levels, which are more win-win than us and them, as it is with this type of rhetoric. This is my humble opinion about the whole issue. I hope I won't get blacklisted for saying what I've said, be it in Mauritius or wherever in the world.
Yes, no. I think it's been a very interesting discussion to understand understand the matter frankly, and I thank you for your insight. I think we really have a good discussion here on it, and I hope that I hope that a lot of people find it very useful. I certainly did. So.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you so much, and it's been a pleasure. Anytime we can speak of Agaliga, we can speak of the French islands of Saint-Brandon, and then the French islands in the Canal of Mozambique. There are so many small spots which are such interesting issues going on.
Well, excellent. Really well, I want to thank you. Yeah, I want to thank you not only for this interview, but for all the work you've been doing and for enlightening us here. So thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, that's all for Independent Thought and Freedom this week. Please join us again next week. And in the meanwhile, make sure you subscribe, leave me a rating, like and share this podcast with your friends. Thanks, and bye for now.